Welcome to the first episode of the Digital Transformation Age podcast, where we investigate that transformation that affects us all. Whether you want it or not, it will hit you, especially in the workplace. My first guest, the awesome Lee Bryant of post-shift fame. If you don't know him, well, Google him. Co-founder of HeadShift in 2002, and I'm reading now, where you investigate new uses for social software inside companies and organizations, and eventually led to being an international social business consultancy, which was acquired by the Dutchess Group in 2009. And now, since 2014, you started PostShift with a couple of others, and there you investigate new forms of organizational design based on social technology.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you explain that sentence just a little bit? New forms of organizational design?
Yeah, so we had been running a web agency in the late 1990s that specialized in building knowledge sharing applications. And when we saw the first blogs in 2001, we were really embarrassed because they were free and better than what we were making. So we realized that something was changing in the world of sort of software. And so we jumped ship, left our old business running in the hands of other people. And we created HeadShift in 2002 because we really believed that social software, so in those days blogs and wikis, later social networks and tagging and social knowledge sharing systems and so on, we really believed that they would transform the way that we organize work inside companies. So we were, I think, the first probably to be doing that in an organized way with large organizations. Did over a decade of projects in lots of different sectors. But what we learned at the end of that was that, even with the best internal social networks and the best social tools and the easiest ability for employees to connect with each other and just to work autonomously, the real barrier to achieving transformation was politics, culture, and structure inside organizations. And unless you address those, you can't really go beyond having nice tools. You can't fundamentally change the world of work. So at the end of that journey, we sort of critically reflected on what we'd achieved with HeadShift. We'd had lots of influence. We'd done a load of really good projects that did change companies in some way. But the new frontier, the next challenge, was really to sort of mainstream new theories of the organization, new organizational models, new operating models, just as we had mainstreamed the social technology, from 2002 to, let's say, 2007, when it became, well known and so on. So that's why we say that today we're interested at working at the intersection between social technologies, not just social, but also you might include data technologies and digital in the broadest sense. The intersection between that and new forms of organization. Essentially, what we're driven by is the question, okay, now that we are all connected, now that we have these superpowers in terms of, connective technology, what is possible in terms of the way we organize work, and what's possible in terms of the way we build institutions for the future? And that question, although we've asked it and other people have asked it as well, the change hasn't really happened in that sense. So this is the next frontier of transformation, I think.
Because post-shift, the name says it, the name of the company says it all, I guess. The shift has already happened.
The shift in terms of technology has happened. And the expectations have changed, and we are no longer in Kansas. We are now in the 21st century, and successful companies, really don't have much of a choice in terms of engaging with digital anymore. And so the question, as you have suggested, I think, is, what comes after? What comes after that shift? And so that's really our mission.
Is it that where you could say that digital transformation is actually going to take place? I know it's a very broad term, and in this podcast I intend to address many other aspects of that transformation itself, not just within a company where you use the social technology, but much broader than that. Um, it's also about the humanity and all the other things. It's post shift, and then we get the digital transformation. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think digital transformation. I mean, the way we see it very, very broadly is there are three sort of big categories of action. There is one which is about how does it change the nature of products and services and business models. So that's a big change. The whole concept of what is a product is changing, what is a service, and how we can operate different business models. And then you need to think about how this changes the way that you engage with your customers and your competitors and the markets and ecosystems in which you operate. And then the third area, which is really where we are grounded, is what does that mean for the organization? What needs to change? What capabilities do you need to possess in order to be able to compete in these new markets and in this new way? So those are what we see as the three areas. And I think what digital transformation needs is, first of all, the technology as an underpinning, but secondly, it does need an act of will, to change the habits and the structures we've inherited in terms of how we organize work. So that's why we say that the transformation is happening sort of after the shift, because the shift is just the enabler for that to happen.
Yes, exactly. So when you get into a company, we spoke a little bit earlier before we started recording, you're working on a, how do you call it, a diagnostic tool in order to determine the state of a company. If you want to transform a company, where do you focus on? Is it that culture shift, or is it the business end shift, the bottom line? Where is it that you start, or does it depend on the business?
It depends on the business. I mean, I think the reality is you have to work simultaneously with culture, structure, and practice. All of those three things are related, and that includes both technological questions as well as people questions, as well as process and behavior questions as well. So you need to do all of those at the same time. But where you begin and how you proceed is very tactical. It depends on the company. So one of the things that we've learned how to do very well is transition strategies. So how can you take a snapshot or an X-ray of the way the company is structured and operates today, identify those pivot points around which you can create change, and identify those points that need to stay fixed. Because you're having to. It's one of those classic situations where you can't sort of shut down a company, rebuild it, and then reopen it again. You have to do.
I don't hear you
anymore.
Loss of
performance.
Yeah.
So you have to do all of this, whilst the company's operating, and so the transition is the really clever bit, I think. How to do it in an imperfect world, a world that's full of challenges and with lots of moving parts.
Very dynamic and all that.
Yeah. Creating a startup around these principles is a lot easier, obviously, but we don't have that luxury in large companies. And I think the reason that we are motivated to continue working with the larger companies is that we think they have a very important role to play in the economy and in society. I mean, if you look at Europe and its history, post World War II sort of economic prosperity in Europe is largely driven by the industrial sector, the manufacturing sector, and more recently the rise of sort of finance and the service sector. So there are lots of existing institutions, lots of existing companies who play a big role in our society, and we need to humanize them, we need to improve them, and we need to give them a competitive role in the future. Otherwise, we'll discover that we can't live by apps and Angry Birds alone. Someone's got to make the roads and the turbines and all this big stuff that we rely on.
If you talk about time frames, I mean, we're talking about businesses in the 21st century. If you want to transform a business from a classical shape to after going through the digital transformation from classical from an analog to a digital business, what kind of time frames would you think about? I mean, I know it depends on the company. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
There's no off the shelf solution. So it's always. But do you have an idea of like an average time frame?
I think minimally you're looking to do a real transformation. Minimally you're looking at 2 to 3 years. But for some big companies it could be as long as 10.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know, that's, I mean, if you think of that as a project, then that sounds like a hell of a long time. But if you think about that as a process which is internally owned, you know, and which is delivering value every step of the way, then that's just like a continuous improvement program.
It's a fundamental shift. It's not just somewhere where you update the HR department to work with a digital tool. You transform the whole company for the very long term, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, we've gone through these phases where certain CEOs might believe that they can run a change program by pulling in McKinsey and doing a study and writing a report and giving the answer, and then McKinsey leave, and then you try and implement it, and actually not much has changed at the end of that process. Fundamentally, what we're interested in doing is building the capacity for change inside companies. So it's not that we have a fixed goal in mind. You know, there's not one predictable future scenario that we can just orient towards and optimize for. What companies need is just the ongoing capacity to evolve and change in response to external threats, internal threats, and changing market conditions. So that's really what it's about. It's about building adaptability. And then the idea is that, you know, somewhere along that journey, we are no longer needed. And then they just continue evolving and changing, you know, based on changing circumstances.
Because it becomes part of the culture.
That's right. So
and they have the abilities to do so.
That's right. I mean, the real fallacy is the idea that you just do one big top-down change program every 5 years or every 10 years. You know, that's not the way.
That's feeding the large consulting firms. They would like to see that kind of business model because they have that continuation then.
That's right, but it's not a reliable way of tooling a company to perform in the future. What you need is the company itself to be always sensing and responding to external influences and having sort of a method and approach, you know, for how they can continue to evolve. But it's got to be internally owned, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's as far as history goes. I mean, you've been busy with this kind of stuff quite a bit sooner than me. But I've been working with social platforms, but knowledge sharing within IT companies, where we have in 2009 the idea was there, and we were trying to make that happen with the technology that we had available, which was wikis, blogs, those kind of things. It was not easy. It was like when LinkedIn just started out, and we kind of got the gist of networking and those kind of things. Now technology is matured in a way where we can adapt it to our needs. We don't have to adapt our needs to the technology, but we can make it the way we want. Plus we have all the philosophies that we've had for the past 20 years or something, where we know how we want to work with each other. We know the humanity is important and sharing information is important for human beings.
Yeah.
There must have been a question there somewhere. Do you feel that now in the 21st century, in which we already are, I think there's still a lot of people that don't get that yet, but that we are in the 21st century, that all these things have finally come together, where we know what it is that we want to do. We know the philosophy behind it, the way we think. We have the technology to do it. And more than that, we have the people's mindset that we can change in order to do it.
I think the possibility is there, the potential is there, but actually if you look at a lot of large companies today, the mindset of the management is, you know, it doesn't feel confident with technology. They haven't perhaps grown up with technology, so it's still handed off to IT, you know, to look after, which is a problem. There needs to be, you know, a culture of confidence with tools and technology throughout the organization so that they can really take ownership of what they're doing. So I think, yes, the technology is there now, but the confidence with the technology is not yet widely enough spread, for companies to do this. And that's why IT people are still the sort of high priests of technology. You go to the IT department to fix, your laptop. If it's a PC, I guess if it's a Mac, you just fix it yourself or use it yourself. And so there's still a way to go. There's still a journey, I think, and it's largely about confidence. I mean, the funny thing is, many people in organizations know what's wrong and they know how things could be better. Many leaders understand that they really need to be getting on top of digital technology and transformation. So I think it's largely a confidence issue, and it's also the absence of existing models. This is not yet in people's education. It's not yet in management education, except in really leading edge companies. And so we're still in that transitional phase, I think.
Do you feel that the upcoming generations, so Generation Y, is now moving from being a mere employee? They're moving into, at the very least, lower management, but gradually up the chains. Do you think this transformation is also driven by that next generation? Is it something inevitable?
Partly, but I think there's a danger of overstating that, because what you need to bear in mind is that Generation Y are still educated in industrial schooling systems. So they're taught obedience, and they're taught to follow the system, not necessarily to follow, what's right or what's the best way of achieving something. And so when they go into a company, if the company says, well, look, leave your social media at the door, leave your, iPhone at the door, here's your, rubbish, big, black, fat laptop full of terrible software. This is how we work. We work through a combination of politics and meetings and all the rest of it. They quickly learn that, and they adapt. Sure. And so, they don't have the power to change companies. Companies usually change them. So it only starts to happen, as you say, when they gradually start moving up the ladder a little bit, and they bring some of their culture with them, or they bring some of their experiences with them. And most of that experience is out of the workplace, because we still live in this bizarre world where, we pay millions and millions of euros for the most awful technology inside the organization, but we go home and we have free stuff that works 10 times better. So we sort of segment our home life from our work life in terms of technology. So yeah, it is changing as these guys, move up the food chain, so to speak. But I think we should beware of overestimating their influence, because if it's your first job or your second job, the last thing you're going to do is tell the company that everything they do is wrong and try and change it. You'll just do what you're told.
And but the gap, indeed, what you said, between home and work becomes larger and larger, because businesses, especially bigger businesses, have a tremendous slow change engine for adapting with technology and those kind of things. I was thinking about that, sometime, where in the past 20 years, when I started working in an office, let me put it that way. I started working a long time before that, but in an office. And now the difference between is that we have LCD screens now instead of the big TFT screens. That's basically the main difference. And you maybe have a wireless mouse, but you're still working in an office suite, usually Microsoft Office, and you still have that email, and that's it. So that hasn't changed, not really much in the past 20 years.
Yeah, although I have to say that's probably one area where Generation Y are genuinely different. They don't tend to use email at all. They are used to everything being real time. So everything is chat, it's iMessage, it's WhatsApp, it's, these sorts of things. And that is a different way of behaving. And that's, that is changing things, I think, because essentially the model of, Word files being transmitted by email as instructions is a 19th century memo model. That's literally what it is. You write your memo and your secretary distributes it, and that's how you carry instructions. It's sort of crazy that persists, today. But it does. And, why does that exist? Well, that exists because we've handed over IT departments complete control over every technological aspect of our working lives, which is not the right solution. So, it is changing, but as you said, the pace of change in fundamental digital workplace tools has been so slow. It's been unbelievably slow.
In your Twitter profile, it says passionate about humanity. I am too. I think. Well, I think most people, when they're confronted with the idea, will say that, yeah, of course, humanity is important. I think passionate about humanity, I think not that many people necessarily are. I always make the case that humanity is the core of what it is that we do. If you lose sight of that, if you push the digital agenda or the economic agenda all the way up front, and you leave that humanity bit behind, you won't succeed where it is that you want. You might hit your goals, but you won't do it with a lot of compassion or fun even. I think that with the digital transformation, obviously we mustn't lose sight of that humanity. Do you think the digital movement as it is now can benefit humanity?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, so the reason, that's a very old quote on my Twitter bio, actually, and it's my daughter is always laughing at me for that statement. But I think, for me, what is, it's not just about humanity from a sort of humanitarian point of view. It's not just saying we need to be nice because. I just think fundamentally all of the most important solutions to problems are based in humans and their connections with each other. So, if you get a bunch of people together who need to solve a very urgent problem and you let them just connect with each other and evolve a solution, they'll evolve a solution. That's how we work. I mean, that's how we've survived ice ages and, various other sort of disruptions. It's an incredibly potent force. And so I guess the reason that I mention that in my Twitter bio is because if you reverse that and you go for the sort of the corporate factory model where everything is process driven, not sort of human driven, it's just a really, really inefficient way of trying to get things done. It's very high cost, it's very slow, and it's very unreliable. And so I think for me, what's interesting about, humanity in terms of the changing nature of work is that it's just a better way of getting things done. If we have this superpower of connectivity that we have today, and we can connect with whoever we need to, and we can just get on with things, man, that's so powerful. There's trillions of dollars of value to be unlocked in the economy, and trillions of dollars of cost to be removed from the economy just by following that really simple principle. So most things that go badly wrong in history are when people try and build systems that subjugate humans and human values to what they believe is the one universal truth, whether that's religion or whether that's politics, and it always goes wrong. I mean, without question, it always goes wrong. And so I think that we now have a really interesting potential to just apply human networked solutions to pretty much everything that we need to do. And so I think that's why I'm passionate about humanity as a sort of paradigm, if you like, for getting things done. Don't misunderstand me. It's not some sort of, it's not some sort of hippie message that we should all hold hands and be nice to each other. We will compete with each other viciously. The world will not be an equal place, and nor should it be an equal place because it's never been one. We can try and soften it and help people that need to be helped. But, humanity as a sort of paradigm of action is, I think, probably the best summary I can find for what excites me about the 21st century.
Yeah, because I always have the notion that when you want to change a business, transform a business, and you put not humans necessarily first, but you educate them alongside the implementation of the social networks that you have, and you let them do what they do best, which is working together, figuring stuff out. Of course, you'll always have some form of conflict or whatever. I mean, they're human, so you'll always have team dynamics with which you have to deal and all those kind of things. I believe that because now that sort of humanity, especially in the command and control structures that we have, so many still, they like to push aside the human element of people.
Yeah.
And when you bring it back again, first of all, the business itself will benefit tremendously from it. You'll be more flexible, you'll be more innovative, you'll be more friendly, you have higher employee retention, all those kind of things. Plus, I like to believe that there's a sort of trickle down where people take that attitude and they bring it home. And they bring it into their home and into their families and into their neighborhoods, and and reconnect with people there in a similar way, because they experience the benefits of communicating with each other that way.
Yeah, I believe in that point quite strongly, because I think it's a mental health issue.
Yeah, exactly.
If we teach people to segment their behavior across different domains of activity. I don't want to go into historical examples too far, but there's an amazing book about the Holocaust by Daniel Goldhagen, German historian about Germany, and he sort of points out that people were able to do terrible evil at the same time as going home, sort of taking their work clothes off and being nice to their kids and listening to opera and all this kind of stuff. And that's what you get when you teach people to segment morality and values in different domains. We, in our first business, we were growing, and we got to the stage we needed a sort of very experienced CFO. So we spent loads of money on a Financial Times advert. We hired somebody from one of the big four. We treated him super well. We supported him in every possible way. And then it came to some kind of issue with our investors, and he sort of basically betrayed us. On a human level, he betrayed us. On a financial level, he didn't do anything illegal. He just went with the money. And he said to us afterwards, he said, it's weird. My wife is so critical of me for doing this. She was like, how could you do that to these people that have supported you and given you a chance? And I said, well, it's my training. My training says, forget the humanity, forget the people, and follow the money. And although it didn't work out for him, or anyone else, that was what he was trained to do. And I think, that sort of stuff is just, you can have a moral discussion about it, but I just think it's not very effective as a way of organizing people, because, when you break down relationships in that way, and you can't have trust, then everything gets hard. Everyone's looking over their shoulder, everyone's asking what's going on, everything costs more, everything takes longer. Mm-hmm. But when you can live within a sort of open, high-trust environment, then everything's a lot easier. So,
well, the reason why I bring it up is now because we have all these tools and we want to have these digital transformations and these social businesses and all those kind of things, that part of that job, if you will, I mean, if you come into a company and that is your job, you cannot focus on the technology alone.
Yeah.
Not just because it's not effective, and not just because the results will not be as but you wouldn't even get the job done. That's the point, I guess. Because
no, completely, I agree. I mean, look, it's no secret that if you're a startup of 10 people and you've got some funding and you're doing something, you're going to be 10 times more productive than an equivalent group of people sitting in a corporate environment, looking at their shoulders. We all know that. The question is, why are we not learning from it?
Yeah, exactly.
And the difference is not beards or football tables or craft ales. These are not the factors. No. The factors are really simple. The factors are high trust environment, task-focused way of working, no bullshit, getting on and trying to pursue a goal together as a group of people who are more or less peers, on a level with each other. Yeah, one of them's a founder, maybe one of them's an office manager, but who cares? They're on a mission together, they're fighting together, and they're moving forward. It's not rocket science. We know it. We've seen it a million times. We've seen it in all areas of life. And yet we don't seem to be able to recreate that same highly effective way of working in many of our large organizations.
Yes, it's the the old office environments that has been rammed into our being ever since we started working, and the generation before us and the generation before that. How many generations do we go back? Quite a
Well, I think
couple.
you can take that model back to the Industrial
Yeah,
Revolution.
exactly.
Because, you know, the post-industrial revolution, you have this concept of the sort of levy en masse of employees, and we had to fill factories with lots of people who had exactly the same basic level of education, could follow instructions. The assumption was they hated your guts as a manager; they'd kill you if they had a chance. So you just keep them locked into this sort of social system that means they give you their labor, you pay them some money, and then they go and get drunk in the evenings to sort of cry about it. But that's not the way most of us are today. Most of us are pursuing some sense of meaning, purpose, mastery. We're maybe doing things for non-financial reasons some of the time. So, we can't assume that we're all just factory workers who don't want to be there. Actually, we want to get things done. We want to succeed, and we want
Yeah,
to.
exactly. Yeah, we want to have some fulfillment at the end of the day. So,
Yeah,
when we get a paycheck and go like, "Oh, I've earned that this month,"
yeah.
I feel good about that. And it's that awareness that brings individuals, but also companies, into the decision-making process where they actually want to go for
Yeah.
the digital transformation.
So look back to your startup example. If you've got these 10 or 20 highly motivated people who are seeking mastery and fulfillment and purpose, you don't need a whole load of processes. You just need to say, let's move forward. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. We know what's sort of right and wrong, broadly speaking. We know what not to do. Just go for it. And that's a beautiful way of working, actually. And you see that in pockets within companies. But for some reason, they can't seem to have the imagination to update their structures to enable that to scale so that everybody can work like that.
It is a tricky thing. I mean, it's definitely something, because you have to change your, for many managers, for instance, they have to change their core essence of what it is that they've learned and what it is that they do, and many managers hang on that level desperately in order not to get. They want to get promoted, but they know that they're not going to make that, and they don't want to get demoted. So it's always a delicate balance.
So that's a structural problem. It's nothing wrong with those managers. They're humans just like anyone else. It's a problem with the structure and the incentives that they're surrounded by. Because I spend quite a lot of time with very senior people in organizations, and they tend to be really smart, really interesting, and they get a lot of this, and they just need the means to sort of adapt the structures below them. It's the people in the middle who've been given the thankless task of sort of operating the machine and protecting budgets and protecting territory. Those are the ones who are perhaps a bit stuck. I think people below will get more opportunities, and people above will be able to work in new and better ways. But we need to find a way of sort of transitioning some of the middle managers into more network-based roles, people who are connectors rather than blockers, for example. We have a little group of ventures. We've created 3 so far, and we have probably at least 1 more to create. There is a role for a consultancy, and that's what the sort of core post-shift offering does. It tries to enable companies to change, gives them methods and tools and all the rest of it. But we recently launched Shift Base, which is another company which is purely a think tank. So it's looking at the societal drivers for better organizations and better institutions. And that gives us a chance to do much more deep research, which I think is still necessary, because we still lack much of the evidence base for why to do this, and also what to do and how it works and so on. But I do think ultimately, we live in a world of sort of, digital experiences and digital tools and products. And so the next venture that we're working on is really a sort of a software play to try and embody some of these methods into very simple tools that people can use themselves without needing to sort of pick up the phone and call us and get us involved as consultants. So we're trying to build a little group, a little family of companies, all of which is dedicated to that same goal of mainstreaming new and better operating models in organizations and helping organizations transition to that new way of working.
Create a certain standard, a certain basic philosophy or methodology
Yeah, I mean, there's no, we don't have all the answers. We're all learning. We're all sort of discovering. But if you look in our knowledge base on shift base, there's like 300 to 400 articles and reviews of different ideas, different techniques, different methodologies, different theories. And I think what we are trying to do is create a methodology that allows people to pick and choose what works for them, and then assemble it in a way that suits the needs of their organization, rather than try and force them into holacracy or sociocracy or a sort of fixed single purpose model. I think most organizations need a mixture of approaches and techniques, and it's got to be very grounded in their own context and their own priorities. So that's what we're about. We're not ideologues in the sense that we know the perfect way to do things, but we read a lot of stuff and we've got a lot of experience. So we can help people a little bit find the way.
And combining knowledge and experiences from others, you can grow your collective intelligence on the matter. And
so we're trying to be a catalyst, really. I think that's how I would put it.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. So go check out ShiftBase. Can anybody join?
Well, at the moment it's just a free resource, so anybody can go to shiftbase.net and access all of our good stuff there. But we are looking for organizational partners for research projects, and also for researchers as well, who can work on very specialized areas.
Good. Well, I hope by the time this comes out, people are listening, and that your ShiftBase, that community will grow. I think it's a wonderful initiative, and it very well translates the humanitarian factor, not the humanitarian, but the humanity aspect of the transition. So
cool. Yeah.
Kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
Lee, as usual, it's been lovely talking to you.
Nice talking to you.
It's always enlightening, and I love being enlightened. For the people who are listening, thank you for listening. For the people who are watching, thank you for watching. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes or all the other means, whichever you want. This was the first episode, and I hope that many will be at least as interesting as this one. So thanks again, Lee, and I will talk to you next time. In a couple of episodes, probably we'll revisit ShiftBase and see how well it's going.
Cool.
That would be nice. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Roger.